From time to time, you might hear me talk about the Power of Podcasting Network. That's a website I have that shows all things Dave, but the tagline is changing the world one download at a time. And today we have Mark Lawley from the Practical Prepping Show at practicalprepping.info, who is actually changing the world one download at a time. Let me share just a little bit from an email that he got from a listener. She says, "Hi, Mark and Krista. I live in Omaha, and yesterday, Friday, April 26th, we were hit with an awful storm and several tornadoes. At least 63 reported tornado sightings in Omaha and the surrounding suburbs." And she says, "I've been anticipating this nasty weather for a few days, and thanks to your podcast, I was able to get my family and I way more prepared than we ever would have been otherwise. From packing a go bag, creating a plan where I would stop if there was a tornado warning while I was driving, wearing durable shoes while we took shelter, to buying and using our handy weather radio, which was glued to my side all day long. Your advice proved to be incredibly practical and probably life-saving. Our weather radio alerted us to several tornado warnings in our area that our phones did not. Again, I just wanted to express my gratitude for all the valuable information you provide. It was a very scary and stressful situation today, but I felt so much more at peace knowing that we were as prepared as we could have been. Please keep up the great work. Take care, Morgan." And so I'm bringing Mark on today to just show you that Mark was just a guy. He'd been a cop for 24 years, and he liked this topic. You'll hear why and how he got it and how it's growing and where it's leading. It's amazing. Hit it, ladies.
The School of Podcasting with Dave Jackson.
Podcasting since 2005. I'm your award-winning Hall of Fame podcast coach, Dave Jackson. Thanking you so much for tuning in. If you're new to the show, this is where I help you plan, I help you launch, I help you grow. If you want to, I'll help you monetize your podcast. My website is schoolofpodcasting.com. Use the coupon code LISTENER, that's LISTENER, when you sign up for either a monthly or yearly subscription. And don't forget, you join worry-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. And so many times, I think people believe you have to be a celebrity or you've got to do all this shenanigans. And I wanted to bring on because Mark is a great guy. He loves his grandkids. He loves his wife. He's a good guy and loves to help people. And he started a podcast about his passion. And wait till you hear how he slowly built it and how if you just keep going and you figure out what your audience wants and you give it to them, good things happen. Mark Lawley, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you, Dave, for the invitation.
One of the things that Mark does well is he realizes when he says, "I'm a prepper," there are some people that prep for things like tornadoes and other people that prep for things like...
We don't do bunkers. We don't do zombies. We don't do alien invasions.
And so why did Mark pick the topic of prepping?
We live in the South. In Alabama, there's a lot of tornadoes. We actually get more tornadoes than Oklahoma.
Now, for my friends across the pond, Oklahoma actually has a thing called Tornado Alley. They have songs about the winds come whipping down the plains. So, yeah.
But Oklahoma, you can see them because they don't have trees. And over the years, we've gone through so many power outages and various things like 24 inches of snow that we couldn't go to the store, things like that. So we began preparing for the things that normally happen. Power outages, snowstorms, ice storms. We've been prepared for inflation. The shortages, we never had any toilet tissue shortages. We had a case. We keep a case. So we started doing that, and somewhere down the line, we wanted to write a book, and we did practical prepping for everyday people. And we released that in earlier 2020, and we really started the podcast to market the book. And never had any idea that the podcast would become so much more popular than the book did. But that was October of 2020. So here we are at 3.5 years in, 466 episodes up, and really having a good time.
And that's really, I think, a key ingredient. If you're having fun with your podcast, it really does carry you through. And if you listen to the show, you'll know that Mark loves coffee and Krista loves spaghetti. But what was it like when they were starting out?
Getting it off the ground, I think the first episode there in about a week, we had about 75 downloads, and we were ecstatic about that. And we would get up in the morning and I would check, and we would have 25, 30 on that morning, and felt good about that. And it just began to take off.
And what were Mark and Krista doing?
We did like everybody else, muddling through, trying to figure this out on our own. And I was listening to you on podcast. I was listening to Kevin Schmidlin. I was listening to anything I could find on podcast. Actually, in the patrol car. I would be listening in the patrol car.
Mark was in law enforcement for 24 years.
And if I had to get out, I'd punch pause and pick it back up when I came in. And I learned some things there, but it was still a struggle of doing the right things.
And when Mark wanted to start doing those right things, where did he go?
We went with you around episode 335, something right in that neighborhood. So we already had 335 episodes up. So one of the daughters said, well, why are you hiring a coach when you're this far in? To learn what to do, to learn what I'm doing, to actually shortcut this. And it was interesting. You pointed out some things that we had no idea we were doing. For example, the very first one you listened to, you said, why are you introducing the show 3 times? And then we would take longer than we should to get to what we're talking about. We might ask some questions before the intro music, and we would try to pique a little bit of interest, but it really did not introduce the topic. So you pointed some of those things out, and we made some actually minor, really tweaks that it really took another set of eyes to see. Like putting the music under the intro, where Krista's talking or I'm talking, and then it comes in for about a couple of measures, fades up, has the entire intro, full volume, and then comes back down as she starts to introduce the program. So little tweaks like that. We've gone to segments when we don't have a full-length topic to cover. Like this morning is 2 subjects, 2 different segments. And so we add in different things there to keep it a little bit more interesting. We let our personalities come through. We're kind of nuts, and, she'll spank my hand on air sometimes. And she just, I guess she's the straight guy and I'm not.
And so they tightened up the show a little bit, created some segments, got clear on who and what each other's roles were, but there was something else that I always focus on and explain how it can really help your show.
And that is this thing of titling. Now, I want the title to tell you what the subject is, but how can I take that title and make a hook out of it? How can I get you hooked? And that's something that I learned is I need your attention in the first 2 minutes if I want you to go on. And so how do I get that hook in the title to make you press play? That's all the title's for, is to make you press play. Then it's up to us. And so in that first minute or so, I want to hook you. And then what I've recently looked at, and I don't remember who you were talking with that talked about this, but it was do your title first and then make sure that what you're doing, and I say teaching because ours is more of a teaching podcast. How do we reinforce that title from what we say? How does everything lead back to that title? And so we've had great response to the getting to the point. and to being very practical with the information that we're giving out, with being very simplistic. And like you, I can take a very complicated subject and make it simple, and by boiling it down and using illustrations that other people will be familiar with.
And as you do this, you create these great stories, these great examples that resonate with your audience. But the other thing that as you do more and more episodes, you become more efficient. So when you first start out, you're like, this takes too long. Eventually, it doesn't.
And we have gotten so much better that it takes me much less time. I was running a little better than 3-to-1 on my editing. Well, now it's just over 2-to-1. Now, I don't edit as tight as I did, but my verbal pause, and I'm sure you've noticed it, is simply a pause. I put that pause in there. Krista throws in a few ums here and there, not many. I mean, she's a very, very good speaker because of her background, but I take her ums out and I shorten my gaps.
When you first start podcasting, it's really easy to fall into the trap of over-editing your show.
I am editing a little looser because we talk differently than we write, and what we're recording is how we normally speak. So a few ums here and there is not a problem. Now, I was listening to a podcast that I no longer listen to. I wish I could, but every third word was an or an and I could not get past it.
And that answers the question, when do you edit out ums? When they become so annoying. I know for me, if I have a clear, no words around it, I pull that out. It's way too easy to just highlight it, press delete, and you're good to go. The ones I leave in is where I go, I think it was yesterday. That's how I do it. And of course, all editing is subjective. But as Mark was moving along, sponsors came a knocking.
They came to us, the ones that we had. Now, a few of those were affiliate links. We generally had 2 paid at a time. Both of those had come to us. I've never actually gone out and sought a sponsorship, although right now I think I'm about to do that. But we have used affiliate links. 2 of those were friends that had companies or businesses that could ship or do. One was the IT guy. Another one is a custom knife maker that can ship anywhere. Very close friends. And I don't know, maybe I thought we needed some ads for legitimacy in the early days. So from the get-go, both of them had free ads.
And so I normally don't recommend doing free ads, but Mark was working with people he knew. He's building those relationships. And the other thing he was finding out was his audience was engaged.
Both of them, I think, picked up some business off of it.
And another way you can test to see how engaged your audience is by using affiliate links.
Then we had several affiliates that we went and signed up for the affiliate link. And some of those have paid some money. And we had we've had several come to us. And one at the time who, interestingly, we picked up a year later because of the number of downloads. They didn't think we were big enough to start with. So I don't know, over a period of time, we've had 5 or 6 paid sponsorships. And I really don't want more than 2 per episode. And one of them now is 1 or 2 spots a month. And so I usually throw them in a third one just because, over deliver. And we lost a major sponsor at the first of the year. They decided to revamp their marketing budget, and that hurt. So to the tune of about $800 a month. But we're operating in the black. I will say that. If I don't go crazy on buying stuff, we stay in the black. Not a lot, but it's still the black.
What else did Mark do to boost his audience? You'll find out right after this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And besides working on his content, Mark also worked on his website.
Now, you did go through our website and we made some tweaks there. It was not bad, but you showed us how to make it better. And one of the awesome things that we did was we put in practicalprepping.info/466 for today's show notes or episode notes. And we call them episode notes there. But that gives them the ability to go straight to the podcast. Now, we do have an index where they can receive all of the ones, and that's /podcast. And so that's just a multi-episode player. But on our episode notes page, it has a single embedded player for that episode. And it has and this came directly from you, the click here to listen on these various ones. I think that's helped to some degree. And I think that's helped people subscribe to that. But one of the things that I will mention is that before we went with you, and this was not an instant process, this was a growing process, but we were running probably first week episode downloads of about 500 to 600. And that was before Dave. And we were probably doing 900 on a 30-day. Well, now we're doing 600 to 900 first day. I looked at the thing a while ago and it had already had 674 today. And that was in like 14 hours. So we're doing over 1,000 on some first day. And almost every first 2 days, we're crossing 1,000. And we're around 1,800, sometimes 2,000 on 30 days. So like I told you one time, I'm not 100% sure what's working. So I don't know of anything I can drop out because it's working.
And one of the things he's added is a Facebook group.
4 months and a week, something like that. And it's grown to 14,000 members.
And that Facebook group is helping to deliver ideas for future topics, as well as growing his audience.
Today, one lady thanked us for the episode that went live this morning and then asked a follow-up question that she had because it dealt with our tornado safety and with long-term storage of water. And she had a water question. So she asked that, and then I answered it, and then I began to notice some of the comments over the next couple of hours, and there were things like, well, where do I hear the podcast? What's the name of it? And the group is Practical Prepping. I mean, everything is Practical Prepping. We've branded it. And so people began to say where they could get it. Some of them were saying anywhere you can get podcast, and I went in and I gave them the /podcast. Go and listen, go to our website. And so I think we're seeing some uptick with that, and I anticipate that that's going to grow even more.
And by having that one page on your website, you let the audience decide where they want to listen to the show. It's not, listen to me on Apple. Well, 70% of Europe is using an Android phone. That's not going to work. Send people to your website, reinforce your brand, and let the audience choose. The other thing they do, especially on Facebook, I never understand this, is people have a podcast and yet you don't mention it in your profile.
And we do some social media post on Practical Prepping Facebook page. And Krista and I have made sure both of our personal profiles reflect the podcast. So if I'm in a group doing what I think it's Kevin calls TDE, targeted, I'm participating in the groups is really what I'm doing. And if they go check our profile, they see it.
14,000 people in a Facebook group could get unruly really quick. Here's Mark's tips on how to handle that.
We don't want snarky comments. We don't want arguments going in there. So we set our rules up with that. And we've booted a few folks. You're not going to call each other names in there. We don't do political discussions because that's downhill no matter what. In fact, Krista told me she turned one down a while ago, somebody saying, climate change, what do you think? Well, that's an explosive waiting. So she turned that one down. And between the two of us, we probably put a couple of hours a day into it. But we're about to add in some moderators and get some help on some of that. Most of what we're doing is reading through to make sure this thread has not gone south. And if it is, we'll freeze the comments and delete the offending ones. Been some name calling a couple of times, and they figured out, hey, we'll boot you in a heartbeat. But it's primarily approving posts and putting members in or approving members manually that don't answer all the questions, but do agree to the rules.
When I was a teacher in the corporate world, I would put a big timer up, and I'm like, this is when we're coming back after our break. And if you're late, I'm not restarting the lesson. And people would come back late, and I would not restart the lesson. They would realize that, oh, wait, I actually have to, follow the rules. And the next time we went on break, everybody came back on time. And one of the bonuses of having an engaged Facebook group is you can get ideas from your members.
Someone asked you where you find your ideas, and you said, well, you go through podcasts and you see the questions people are asking. So we're looking at, what are you struggling with? What is the problems that you are having? And it works in podcasting, it works in prepping, it works in business, whatever. What problems are you dealing with? Maybe that will make a good episode.
And that's one of the beautiful things about having an engaged audience is we're not sure, can we go a little left? Can we go a little right? Wait, what if we throw this in? Mark's getting that kind of feedback from his audience.
And that's another thing that we've done is we have branched out in our episode topics to a big degree. Things that in our first 25 episodes, we wouldn't have thought about. This is a good prepping podcast or a topic. But now we see one of the big things is financial prepping. We need to be prepared. We need to get our debts down. We need to get our savings up. We need maybe some side gig income, and we need to cut our expenses down. So it's a very important topic. So we did an interview with Ralph Estep Jr., who is an accountant with the Ask Ralph podcast.
And also a member of the School of Podcasting. You've heard me say how awesome the community at the School of Podcasting is. There are people there planning shows together. It's all sorts of fun stuff. And if you've listened to this show, look, ads are fun. Ads are fine. Although I did hear on a show called the Media Roundtable where they really focus on advertising and audio branding. And the head of Oxford Road had this to say about the current status of advertising.
Let's say it out loud. It's not going that well.
And we'll save that for a future episode. I always say, if you can, once you know what your audience needs, see if you can create a product or a service that will help them achieve their goals. And that's what Mark is doing. He's going to be launching some courses.
And I'm about to go ahead and purchase Teachable and start learning how to get that in there. There's some things that I'm going to have a learning curve on. One is video. There's going to need to be some video in there. And I can spell video, and that's about the extent of it. So I've been talking to you guys about how do I edit this and make it look decent and make it not look like I'm jumping from here to here, real suddenly on the edits. And there's some things we want to do on some how-to. But we're laying out those courses now.
And of course, that leads you out of your comfort zone. When you're learning new things, it's not great. You don't feel wonderful. You don't feel confident. And just realize that when you do that, you are growing as a person. You're adding a valuable skill to your skill set. But if we go back to the beginning of this, they started the podcast to promote the book. How's that going?
We have seen an increase in book sales with that.
And that's great, but we all seem to fall into the same issue.
We haven't pushed that book in quite a while. And we've released another book, our third book, and it's the 31-day devotional for preppers. And we hit it a couple of times, and we got some decent book sales off of that, but we've backed off. And when we were talking, we're thinking, why are we advertising other people, but we're not advertising our own stuff?
And the typical answer to that is, I don't want to feel salesy. And you have to realize that that product, whatever it is, that service that you created because you knew your audience and you knew what they needed, is helping them. So you're not selling to them, you're helping them. And I asked Mark if somebody was starting a podcast today, what would be his advice?
One thing is you do a little planning, and you have to plan where this thing's going to go, which we didn't do as well. We worked on, the weekend for what we're going to record on Monday. And by planning ahead, you have an idea of where you're going. And at some point, you have to sit down and get started. Now, those first episodes are going to suck. They're going to stink, okay? You're not going to like your voice. Get over it. Do what you need to do. Throw those first few episodes away. We recorded our first episode 3 different times. One time because somebody forgot to press record. And we recorded the whole thing and then got to go back and do it again. So really write out a workflow. I don't have to do it now. I know what my workflow is. But earlier I sat down and I wrote down a workflow. I have to do this, I have to do this, and I have to do this and go through the steps. But for somebody starting out, my biggest advice, and you've probably seen me say this several times in podcast forums, hire a coach. Hire a coach that can shorten that learning curve, somebody that will be honest with you. Your mother's going to love it no matter what you do, okay? But she does not know podcasting, and she's not going to hurt your feelings. Or you might have a brother or sister that said that stinks, but you need somebody that knows what they're doing, knows how to help you launch that podcast. And there's those things that need to come up to do it right. Now, you can launch it. All you've got to do is record it and upload it, and it's launched. But it's not right. And that's the thing. It's like edit. I see so many people say, well, we don't edit because we want it to feel natural. Okay. I'm not going to listen very long.
Yeah, me neither. I'm going to keep it real. Well, I call that keeping it real boring.
But set your goals, know what you plan to do, strategize how you're going to market this thing. Because one of the hardest things of podcasting is marketing it, getting it in front of people where they can listen. Recording's the easy part, especially after a period of time when you've got enough to where you can just sit down and talk. Even with our podcast, now we use Evernote and we write the podcast, we outline what we're doing, and I'm starting to write more of the notes before we go to recording to make sure I cover this. And then on Evernote, which we've both got monitors on our desk here, we bring up the outline. And so we're following along that outline. And we use an outline because if we use a sentence, it can sound too much like we are reading. And we don't want that. I mean, some people can, Krista can read it well, and you won't know whether she's reading or not. Not me. If I read it, you're going to know it. It's like me using the digitized AI voice. It's going to stick out. And there's no exact, perfect length for a podcast. Ours run around 30 minutes. But whatever you're going to do, be somewhat consistent with that.
Back in 2005, I coined the phrase changing the world one download at a time. I used that for my, if we could put up air quotes here, my network, which is just a page listing all of my shows. But we talked monetization today, and we've talked about building relationships. But really, there are things that you don't see that are going on because you've put your message out into the world.
Yeah, there's a couple of comments that really stick out. And one said, thanks to you, we got through this hurricane. Thank you so much. Because of what you said, we actually were better prepared for what we went through. That makes it worth it. And that's it's humbling.
Yes. And how does that make you feel when you really think about it?
It makes us feel all warm and fuzzy that there is a sign hanging up here between these two windows that says, make a positive impact on others. That's what we're all about.
And while they're having fun doing their show, there are still some things that are, well, kind of scary.
When I pastored a church, someone said, "Does it bother you when people go to sleep during your sermon?" I said, "No, not at all. Doesn't bother me at all if they go to sleep. What scares the bejesus out of me is somebody takes what I say and lives their life based on that. That's a little bit scary." So what this does with people thanking us for what we said or episodes we put out or articles we wrote that help them through something, that makes us feel like we must be more accurate with our information.
And there are times when we might think, well, who am I to talk about this? I'm not really qualified. Well, all you need to know is a little more than your audience.
I've not been hit by a tornado, but my sister in Nashville was hit. In fact, she was running down the road trying to get home with 2 babies in her arms. The house was not damaged as much as it could have been, but there was a lot of tree damage that was in her yard blocking the entrance. And when I found out about it, I spent the next day getting ready, which today all I would have to do is go in the garage, put this stuff in the truck and go.
So that experience with his sister helped him see you need a way to cook food. You need a way for hot water and to stay warm and all sorts of other things and to repair your house and fix those changes when the unexpected happens.
And it's just, it has helped us to understand what the actual survivor of these disasters are going through.
And when you live in a place where it's likely that this could happen, you want to be prepared. And what does it look like when you're prepared?
I can't control what might happen to the roof in a tornado, but there's 5 or 6 tarps in the garage. There's ladders, hammers, and nails. If I have to get out here in the morning and patch the roof, I have the stuff to do it, because the day after the tornado, Lowe's, Home Depot, Ace, everybody else is out of tarps.
And that's when you're going to go, oh man, I should have listened to Mark and Krista. I heard that episode and I didn't take any steps. One of the steps that people are taking, though, especially when Mark's talking about coffee, is he's using the Buy Me a Coffee service. And when you deliver value to people, some, not all, unfortunately, but some of them, usually around 3%, might actually give you some of that value back.
I don't think we've ever had anybody buy us 1 cup. Now, there's been a lot of people that did a $50 membership. We're not offering anything extra for the membership. And one lady has done that 3 times. She does that about every 4 months. And she just wants to see the podcast grow and go. And I retired from law enforcement last July. And Krista won't let me stay home and just watch soap operas. So I have to have something that can generate some income. And although this is somewhat small, hopefully that will grow. I mean, we took that hit at the first of the year, losing some sponsors, but we'll come back. And the deal is I have to make the house payment from the podcast. That's the idea. I get there, she's happy.
And I love that, because that is a clear goal of how am I going to measure the success of this podcast? And the answer is when I can make my house payment, that's success. Now, from there, you set a new goal and you go from there. So, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience here on the podcast.
Well, thank you. And if I can say anything to anybody listening, hire Dave. It will be well worth the effort.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was very nice to say. But you see, he started out, then got in the habit of making content, then got a little help. I'll give you an example. Why I always say you need somebody else to listen to it. I just had this happen to me today. Rich Graham reached out to me and said, hey, Dave, you got that new podcast called Your Podcast Website. On the 3rd episode, when you come back from the break, you said the guest's website wrong. I didn't notice it, right? You need somebody to go, hey, did you know you're missing that? Did you know, those little things can really help. And so Mark and Krista got their content a little more tight, got to the content, listen to their audience, started a Facebook group, all these things. It's just one more thing that you add and one more thing that you add. And each little piece brings more insights to your audience. And the better you know your audience, the better the content you can make for them. And now Mark realizes that he can solve some of their problems. They need help with this. And so now he's getting ready to start making courses. And that, again, I'm sure if you ask Mark, he knows his stuff, but it's a new piece of software he has to learn. I think he's going to use Teachable. You know, you get out of your comfort zone, and that's not always fun, but you get there, and he's having fun with his wife as they're doing this, and they're helping people. That puts a lot of gas in your tank. So again, I just want to remind you that, to quote the great Zig Ziglar, you don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to be great. And so here's Mark and Krista using this little handheld recorder. It got them going. And really, once you get going and you realize that, as we like to say here on the School of Podcasting, nobody's going to punch you in the face, and you're actually helping people and you're getting feedback, then it's just a matter of like, oh, and that's what they said. Well, then they upgraded their equipment, and then they did this, and then they added one more thing. And as they keep moving along, the audience continues to grow. And just Mark and Krista, thank you so much for all you do, and thanks for coming on the show. As I look at the calendar, we are approaching that deadline for the question of the month. So if you haven't answered it yet, schoolofpodcasting.com/question. Don't forget that you can join the School of Podcasting by going to schoolofpodcasting.com. And look, this is for you. I made a coupon code, LISTENER, LISTENER. When you use that, when you sign up on either a monthly or yearly subscription, and that comes worry-free with 30 days to go, I don't think this is for me. You get step-by-step courses. You get unlimited one-on-one coaching, not with my team, with me. With me. Other people are like, oh yeah, unlimited coaching with Marv over there. Yeah, no, you get coaching with me. Unlimited. And of course, people like Mark, people like Ralph, people like Craig, also, the amazing School of Podcasting community, which keeps me up. That's the people go, why do you love podcasting? Because I get to hang out with people in our community that I'm always like, that is so cool. So thanks so much for listening. Go to schoolofpodcasting.com/follow if you want to make sure you never miss an episode, and go back and listen to any of the other 900 plus episodes. They're all there. And I will see you next week. Until then, take care. God bless. Class is dismissed.